The candle gutters in the imperial chamber, its flame a defiant spark against the velvet darkness. 11 days. 11 endless days since the Empress had stood, had walked the marble halls, had raised her chin to the court, had reminded them that even gods bow to the eternal flame of Solara. She sat now on the throne, spine rigid as the blade she once commanded, her once vibrant crimson gown faded to ash gray. Dark circles ringed eyes that once burned with conquest. Her hands trembled as they gripped the armrests. The court had whispered for a week. Now they watched in silence, the silence of a blade sheathed too long. The doors exploded open. Not a servant's knock. Not a herald's trumpet. A breach. He strode in like a storm-given flesh, broad-shouldered, scarred, the warrior whose name even the palace maids had once gasped in nightmares. General Kale Voss. The man the Empress had nearly executed for excessive zeal. The man she had ordered stripped, branded, and thrown into the lowest dungeon beneath the palace. Yet here he came, unbowed, unarmored except for the single crimson sash across his chest. His boots left wet prints on the blood-stained tiles where the last traitor had fallen only hours ago. He stopped 3 paces from the throne, head high, and for the first time in 11 days the Empress saw something she had not allowed herself to feel since the fever took her. Hope. Kale's voice cut through the stunned quiet, low and rough as grinding stone. Empress. He did not bow. Did not ask permission. The outer wall has held for 9 hours. But the Tremor Legion marches at dawn. Their blood magic will turn the canal into a river of red before the sun rises. They need your strength tonight. Or they will take it. The chamber erupted in gasps. Lords scrambled for their sashes, women clutched each other, a child's whimper rose from the back rows. The Empress rose. Slowly. Pain lanced through her legs like lightning, but she did not fall. She stepped down from the dais, each movement a victory carved in fire. 11 days of lying on silk while the world burned below her. 11 days of listening to whispers that she was broken, that she had grown soft. 11 days, and this man had come to remind her she was still steel. She stopped directly in front of him. Close enough that she felt the heat of his chest through the thin fabric of his shirt. Close enough that she saw the single tear he refused to let fall, the only crack in the warrior's mask. General, she said, voice hoarse but steady, you dare enter my chamber without permission. You dare speak of breaking walls when you yourself were supposed to be your prisoner. Kale's jaw tightened. I dare because you stopped standing. Because the people need to see their Empress whole. Because if you fall again tonight, the Empire dies with you. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the sash at his chest, then slid up to grip the front of his shirt. The fabric was damp with sweat and blood, his blood, probably from fighting the outer gate alone. You should be dead, she whispered, the words trembling now. I ordered it. I watched you burn in the pit. And still, you came. His hand rose, slow, giving her every chance to flinch. It settled at the small of her back, warm and solid. The touch burned hotter than the fever had. I came, he said, voice dropping to something raw and intimate, because the only thing more terrifying than losing you, was staying away. The silence that followed was heavier than any execution. The court held its breath. Outside, the first distant rumble of tremor war drums began to echo across the city like a lover's heartbeat. The Empress's free hand rose to cup his scarred cheek. Then stand with me, Kale Voss. Tonight. Not as your general. Not as your prisoner. As the only man who has ever made me remember what it feels like to be alive. His breath hitched. The warrior who had led legions to victory suddenly looked like a man who had just lost everything he feared losing most. I was never your prisoner, he said fiercely. I was your shield. And tonight. I will be your arms as well. He pulled her close. Not gently. Not like a man afraid of breaking something precious. He claimed her mouth in a kiss that tasted of blood, salt, and 11 days of waiting. The kind of kiss that said, I have carried you for 11 days inside me, and I will never let you fall again. The Empress clutched his shirt tighter, her knees finally giving way, only because he was there to catch her. For the first time in 11 days, she stood. Not alone. Not broken. In the arms of the man who had changed everything by refusing to stay gone. Outside, the drums grew louder. Inside, the candle flared brighter. And for the first time in an empire, the Empress had never been more alive. But as the kiss deepened, as Kale's arms tightened around her like the very walls he had defended for 9 hours, something shifted. The fear in the chamber wasn't only for the Empire anymore. It was for her. For them. The Empress, once a conqueror who had ruled with an iron fist wrapped in silk, felt the weight of 11 days crush her ribs as she clung to the one man who had ever refused to look away when she broke. Kale pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling in the candlelit haze. His eyes, usually cold with the fire of a battlefield general, were molten now, raw with 11 days of his own torment. He had watched her from the pit, chained in iron that burned like the sun, while the court celebrated her deathbed. He had torn the bars from his cell with his bare hands, bloodied knuckles and all, and climbed the walls in the dark, leaving a trail of guards' corpses in his wake. He had fought through the outer gate alone, his sword singing through magic-forged steel, because the thought of her empire falling without one last stand from him had been more than he could bear. Empress, he rasped, the title now laced with something deeper, something that made her heart stutter against his chest. I came to die for you. Not to rule beside you. But I find I can't do either without you. She swallowed, the tremor in her lips betraying the terror she had buried for days. The fever had taken not just her strength, but her voice, her fire. The court had seen her as a withered flower, a relic to be pitied. But Kale saw her as the storm she had always been. And that seeing was terrifying. Because it meant he wanted her, not just as Empress, but as a woman. As a lover. As the one person who could make a man like him, who had lost everything in the Tremor Wars, believe in something more than survival. She pulled him closer, her fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt until the seam strained. Then die with me if you must, she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time in weeks, but stand with me now. Let me feel something real again. Let me feel you. The court erupted, not in protest, but in stunned silence that shattered as Kale's hand slid up her back, tracing the line of her spine through the faded gown with a reverence that made her breath hitch. 11 days of solitude had left her skin on fire. His touch was calloused from years of war, yet gentle now, as if he were afraid she would shatter. She pressed her forehead to his again, inhaling the scent of blood and smoke and something achingly like home. Home. The palace had felt like a cage. His arms felt like the only open sky. Outside, the drums swelled. The Tremor Legion was closer now, close enough that the ground trembled faintly beneath the palace foundations, a warning she could no longer ignore. She had stood once before the walls of the capital, leading charges that turned the tide. But the fever had stripped her of that power. The wounds beneath her skin still ached, invisible scars that no amount of healing magic could mend in her mind. Kale seemed to sense it. His free hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing her lower lip as he pulled her back into another kiss, this one slower, deeper, a promise wrapped in centuries of unspoken longing. She tasted the salt of his tears now, felt them against her own cheeks. 11 days of watching her empire crumble had carved hollows beneath his eyes that mirrored hers. He had not eaten. He had not slept. The men who had once followed him to the gates now whispered that their general was broken, that he had lost the will to fight. But he had not. He had fought for her. The kiss broke, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just their two hearts hammering in sync. The Empress's hands roamed his shoulders, feeling the corded muscle that had carried her through battles in her youth. She remembered the day he had first joined her ranks. Young, arrogant, eyes blazing with the same fire that now burned for her. He had challenged her to a duel, won by a hair's breadth, and earned her respect in the same breath. She had never forgotten that respect. Not even when she ordered his death. "I should have killed you that day," she admitted, the words tumbling out between gasps. "Instead, I watched you suffer. And it killed me more than any blade ever could." Kale's laugh was bitter, edged with the kind of pain that only came from 11 days of self-inflicted exile. "You did what you had to. I understand. But don't you dare apologize for it now. Because this," he gestured between them, his hand splaying over her heart, "this is what I was fighting for. Not the Empire. Not the throne. Not even victory over the tremors. You. Only you." The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Emotion surged through her. Raw, unfiltered, 11 days of grief and guilt and want crashing into one another. She felt tears prick her eyes, hot and unstoppable now. "I was so tired," she confessed, her voice breaking into a sob she hadn't allowed since the fever first claimed her. "The court whispered that I was weak. That the Empress must never kneel, never feel. But I felt everything. Every night I lay there, imagining the walls falling, imagining you dying alone because of me. And I couldn't stand. Couldn't move. Couldn't be the woman who had toppled empires." Kale's arms tightened around her, lifting her slightly off the ground as if she weighed nothing. His lips brushed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, soft kisses that grounded her even as they set her soul ablaze. "You are still that woman," he murmured against her skin. "The same fire that lit the skies when you led the charge at the Battle of Iron Peaks. Remember? I was the one who held your banner when it snapped. I was the one who carried you on my back when your horse fell. And I still do. Every day I stood in the pit, I carried you with me. Your strength. Your fire. Your pain." She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of him, smoke, steel, and the faint trace of the herbs he used to fight the fever that had nearly taken him too. Her hands slid down his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palms. It mirrored her own, frantic and alive. 11 days of separation had been a torture she never knew she could endure. Now, in his arms, it felt like salvation. The court stirred. A lord, old General Vale, once her father's right hand, cleared his throat loudly. "Empress, the tremors are at the gates. The blood magic will." "Silence," Kale snapped, not even turning. His gaze never left hers. "The Empress stands. The Empress commands. And I will not let her fall while I draw breath." The old general bowed stiffly, retreating into the shadows. The rest of the court followed suit, the whispers fading into respectful murmurs. They had seen what the fever had done. They had heard the rumors. But Kale's presence, unbowed, unashamed, had shattered the illusion. The Empress was not broken. She was reclaiming. She pulled back just enough to look at him fully. His face was streaked with dirt and dried blood, yet it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Scars crisscrossed his jaw and neck, trophies from wars she had fought beside him. One particularly deep line across his left cheek curved from an arrow in the Battle of the Ashen Plains. She traced it with a trembling finger, memorizing the feel of him again. "Why did you come alone?" she asked, her voice soft now, laced with awe. "You could have brought an army. You could have stormed the palace like a conqueror." "Because I couldn't risk another battle," he said, his thumb wiping a tear from her cheek. "Because the tremors move faster than men. Because I knew if I brought them, I'd be fighting for you instead of with you. And I needed to see you breathe. Needed to hold you. Needed to fix what I broke when I let you order my death. She laughed then, a broken, joyful sound that echoed through the chamber. You didn't break me, Kale. You reminded me. I had forgotten how it felt to need someone. To depend on someone. To let them carry the weight. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands roaming her back with a possessiveness that spoke of 11 days of denial. His fingers traced the line of her spine, pausing at the base where the gown dipped, sending sparks down her nerves. She arched into him, her body responding with a hunger she had buried under layers of duty and grief. 11 days of isolation had starved her senses. His touch was everything. Rough and tender, demanding and adoring. When they broke apart, gasping, she pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath it. I want you, she whispered, the words shocking her as much as they filled her. Not just tonight. Not just as a lover in the face of death. I want you in every way. The way I should have from the beginning. The way I've been starving for. Kale's eyes darkened, the warrior's control fraying at the edges. Empress. I'm no saint. I've killed more men than I can count. I've watched cities burn. But with you, I feel alive. For the first time in years. Then let me show you what alive feels like, she said, guiding his hand to her waist. Her gown whispered as he lifted her effortlessly onto the throne's edge, the wood creaking under his strength. She wrapped her legs around his hips, pulling him close. The touch of his body against hers, hard muscle and heated skin, sent a thrill through her that made her forget the pain, the fear, the Empire's fate. Outside, the drums reached a crescendo. The tremors were at the bridge now. But inside, time slowed. Kale's lips found her neck, trailing fire down to her collarbone, where the faded gown had slipped. She gasped, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. He groaned against her skin, the sound vibrating through her bones. 11 days, she breathed, arching as his hands explored her with a reverence that made her cry out softly. I felt every second without you. Every breath I took thinking I'd never feel this again. He lifted his head, eyes blazing with the same intensity that had once made her heart race on the battlefield. And I felt every second without you. Every night I lay in that pit, I imagined this. Imagined you in my arms, not as my empress, but as the woman I love. The word hit her like a lance to the chest. Love. She had never said it. Not to him. Not to anyone. But in that moment, with his forehead pressed to hers again, she felt it blooming like the eternal flame itself. I love you, she whispered, the confession tearing at her soul. I've loved you since the day you challenged me. I was just too proud to say it. Too afraid to need you. Kale's smile was slow, triumphant, and devastatingly tender. Then let's make the world burn around us, he said, lifting her from the throne and carrying her to the wide bed in the corner, the one she had never left in 11 days. He laid her down gently, as if she were made of glass and starlight. Because I've got all night to remind you what it feels like to be my empress. And I've got the strength of 1,000 battles to hold you when the tremors come. She pulled him down, their bodies tangling in a dance as old as empires and as new as their stolen moment. His hands explored every inch of her, mapping the curves the fever had stolen and the love he had given back. She traced the scars on his back, feeling the raised lines that told stories of loyalty and loss. He whispered her name like a prayer, like a vow, as they moved together. Slow at first, then urgent, the kind of lovemaking that spoke of 11 days of waiting, 11 days of survival, 11 days of a love that had never truly died. The candle burned low, the drums faded into the distance as the first rays of dawn crept through the windows. Kale held her afterward, her head on his chest, his fingers stroking her hair. She felt whole. Alive. The Empress who had not stood in 11 days had risen in his arms. And she would stand with him against the tremors, against the whispers, against the world. Because he had changed her. Not with fire or sword. With a single, defiant act of defiance. With the only thing that truly mattered. Him.